Colleen Walsh, a career intelligence officer erased from public family life by secret work, returns to her military family's promotion ceremony for her sister Erica. Centuries of silence and a single early remark from their mother, "Not everyone is meant to be exceptional," framed Colleen as the family shadow. When she unexpectedly is publicly recognized by a general, long-buried tensions erupt. An anonymous leak accusing Colleen of causing civilian casualties surfaces, and evidence points to Erica's credentials being used. Investigation reveals an external saboteur, Derek Glade, exploiting family fractures. Erica had initiated an email chain in jealousy. The family is forced to reckon with truth, betrayal, and repair. Colleen leads the inquiry, reclaims public authority, and the family begins awkward reconciliation. The screen opens on Colleen's hands, not a medal or salute, but the callus where a coffee mug once sat. She sets a black travel cup on a workbench in a cramped ops room. Outside, dawn flattens the city into steel. A wall of monitors hums, scrolling maps and signal traces. Her fingers hover, not on a keyboard but on a dog-eared Polaroid taped to the edge of the monitor. A family barbecue, two smiling faces, an empty space where she remembers standing. She taps it once with a thumb and returns to the screen. A distant trumpet from a brass band bleeds through the base's morning fog. On screen, a live feed of Fort Campbell, a banner, uniforms lined like piano keys. Her reflection catches in the dark glass of the main monitor, a woman in civilian coat, a line at the temple, a quiet that belongs to someone who has been practiced at silence. She runs a flat hand over her face, inhales. The camera follows her exhale into flashbacks, a kitchen table, coffee steam, her mother's voice like a knife wrapped in velvet. Not everyone is meant to be exceptional. The words hang, her 17-year-old face folds inward like dried paper. Cut back, Colleen's jaw tightens. She tucks the Polaroid into a folder labeled Legacy, the corners bent, like something carried too long. Title card, Colleen Walsh. She drives through early light. The convoy of SUVs and polished boots at the base gate rise like a well-rehearsed play. Staffers check names. Chauffeurs smile the practiced smile of people who move the world in little, invisible pushes. Colleen parks near the logistics fence, where the gravel remembers the rhythm of boots better than people. She steps out in a plain coat folded over a uniform shirt in her bag. Not a show, not a surrender. Her boots whisper over stone. At the house, lemon cleaner scent and brass shine stage a normalcy that has always felt like costume. Family photos parade down the hallway. There's a pattern. Every frame shows accomplishment, medals, ribbons. The camera hunts for her image and finds none. At the dining table, place cards line up like awaiting verdicts. Her mother arranges one with practiced hands and, without looking up, says, "Go change. Sit with Erica. Don't make it awkward." The word awkward lands like a verdict. Colleen only nods. Erica enters like a spotlight, dress blues immaculate, the scale of her smile calibrated to command. She glides the room, trading handshakes and soft laughter. When she gestures toward Colleen, a casual, "This is my sister. She used to be in the military," ribbing laughter folds into the room like a shroud. A cousin's whisper slices, "VA? Office work now." Faces bend toward the narrative they've known for years. Colleen becomes the absent variable in their tidy equations. Colleen moves through a crowd that has memorized her silence. She crouches to accept a child's question about guns and answers with the spare truth. "I once saved 30 people alive by not shooting." The child runs off, confusion dissolving into play. She catches a glass in a hand that trembles. Her mother's water falls to the floor like a gunshot. Someone's attention lifts as someone else's world tilts. That lift of gaze will open a room. A camera cuts to the ceremony hall. Rows of chairs, a podium waiting like a pulpit. Colleen sits in the third row from the back, assigned, not chosen. Lights warm the lectern where Erica will speak about loyalty and sacrifice. The speech smells faintly of directed intent. Colleen's hands fold in her lap. Her reflection in a polished chair back is the same woman who learned to be invisible because the world asked her to be. The trumpet blares again, and beyond that note, the story's first fracture begins to pulse. The hall breathes in ritual. Erica's speech begins the familiar litany of duty and distance, phrases polished to shimmer. We are a lineage. We hold the line. It is meant as ceremony, but there's an undertow. Colleen watches the room like a field operative watching a pattern of movement. Who turns, who whispers, who waits for the cue. Her father sits upright, jaw set in ceremonial masonry. Her mother scans faces with patient protocol, lips a thin rule. Mid-sentence, a ripple, not applause but a change in the room's atmosphere. General Hammond, whose presence carries weight like a physical field, crosses the aisle. He stops directly in front of Colleen. For a moment the world reduces to the distance between two salutes. He lifts his hand. "Ma'am," he says, and the military grammar hits the air like punctuation. Eyes pivot. A dropped glass shatters, a sound that stitches itself into memory. Erica's breath hiccups. The script she'd been reading flickers. Colleen returns the salute, not for show but because respect is a currency you can't counterfeit. After, in the retreat of casual clusters and polished conversations, a plain envelope, manila, anonymous, appears on the guest room dresser. Colleen opens it because curiosity and intelligence is obligation. The first line of the forwarded email reads like an accusation dressed in data. Reckless operation, civilian casualties. The paper trembles in her hand. The narrative they'd assumed about her being a quit forms teeth. She reads with a professional calm that masks the pinch of recognition, phrasing from a classified report she had seen in a steely room. A bad joke, she thinks. Or not. She keeps the scan, slips it into her jacket. Later, at the after-party, the lounge is a galaxy of congratulatory smiles and measured praise. Erica floats, radiant and effortless, until Colleen intercepts her at the doorway. The papers shift between them like heat. "Did you send this?" Colleen asks softly. Erica's eyes collapse inward for an instant, then she admits, quiet yes. The whisper has more than resentment, it has an old hunger, to be noticed, even if noticing means making waves. The confession isn't a cinematic blow, but a domestic blade. Colleen doesn't lash out. She studies. Why? Erica's look is close to child and soldier at once. You left. You were always the shadow everyone used to measure me against. I wanted to make a place in the sun. Her words are thin armor. Colleen watches the reasoning, not satisfied by explanation, but wanting to understand the fracture's origin. Night gives way to emergency. A siren's keening stabs the base. The operations center floods with people who move like trained instruments. A breach. Dagger-related files have been posted on an encrypted forum. The trace points to an inactive device assigned to Colleen, digital fingerprints that feel like accusation. For the first time in years, formal suspicion is aimed at the woman who lived in the shadows. At the command table, Colleen meets General Hammond's eyes and reads not condemnation, but a pragmatic recognition. There will be no easy answers. He taps the file, then looks at her. Will you lead this? There is a practical cruelty in the question. She is the only one with motive, clearance, and, crucially, the capacity to follow a digital blood trail. She accepts. The decision closes a loop. The woman who could not be seen now must step into visibility by choice. Her family is folded into the task force, father, mother, and Erica assigned roles that feel less like cooperation and more like surgical exposure. Around them, servers hum like sleeping beasts. Colleen lays out the first plan, and the mathematical cadence of piecing together a leak becomes a new kind of family conversation, brutal, precise, necessary. Tension tightens like a wire. A breakthrough arrives as a whisper, a dormant Trojan placed years ago, finger-inked with a name, Derek Glade, a strategist whose grudges had the time to congeal into strategy. The map tilts. The betrayal is not merely sibling jealousy. It is a professional grudge waiting for permission to do harm. Colleen's gaze lands on Erica. This time it is not accusation, but bewilderment as the pattern widens beyond what either of them had imagined. The forensic map looks like an old battlefield. Data points glow, timestamps, login credentials, backdoor pings from forgotten nodes. Colleen pulls threads and watches them unravel a story that wasn't only internal. Derek Glade, a strategist whose career had collided with hers in 2017, appears across the logs like a scar that never healed. He'd had temporary override access. Someone had tucked a Trojan into an archival node years ago, dormant until an ordinary action, an email chain begun by a jealous sister, woke it. Recognition arrives in stages. Colleen replays a memory, an argument over tactics in Mosul, a clash that got under Derek's skin. He'd called her bureaucratic to her face. Privately, he called her an obstacle. Now the Trojan's mechanical code reads like a revenge letter. The story shifts. This is not only sibling betrayal, but a man weaponizing institutional resentment. The task force narrows the origin to a motel just outside base, a booking in cash, a name that fits Derek's modus operandi. A raid is arranged with surgical speed. Colleen finds herself in the field again, not with a rifle, but with a warrant. The old trained muscle memory, clear, cold decision-making returns. They move on the motel and find Derek mid-upload, tired, unremarkable. He doesn't run. He looks almost relieved. In the interrogation room, the air smells like bleach and answers. Derek reclines, his voice flat and detailed. "I didn't want to ruin her," he says. "I wanted to displace her." He frames his act as engineering and institutional correction. If Colleen became a liability publicly, her role shrank, and the people he coveted would return to their rightful places. His motives land somewhere between hatred and a warped civil service vision, a man angry that the system rewarded courage he didn't respect. He built a trap that used family fractures as a fuse. Derek's confession unspools the external plot, but it also reframes Erica's role. The email she'd sent became the match. She admits that at first it was a small, petty act, forwarding a red flag note to a fringe channel, hoping to expose a career she felt overshadowed by. She never intended the cascade that followed. The guilt she bears is raw and unvarnished, not grandstanding but a raw bruise. Colleen watches her sister become human in a way she hadn't allowed before, not merely rival, but girl who'd wanted light and misjudged how to take it. This twist widens the emotional field. It's no longer simply a story about a hidden life revealed. It's a story about how systems amplify small cruelties into institutional damage. Colleen, now with Derek in custody and the Trojan located, realizes the leak was both personal and professional, a hybrid felony of human brokenness and technical exploitation. Consequence arrives in official channels. Erica accepts administrative culpability. She signs an addendum to the task force report that acknowledges the email chain. She forfeits promotion eligibility for 5 years. The penalty is both public and intimate. For Erica, it is a loss more like a stripping than a punishment, the facade of deservedness removed. In private, Colleen confronts her feelings not with drama, but a surgeon's bluntness. She sits in an empty briefing room with the scan on the table between them. "Why?" she asks again, different this time. The answer is nuanced and smaller. "I was tired of living in your shadow," Erica says. "I wanted to be seen." For the first time, Colleen hears not malice, but a confession rooted in loneliness. The revelation shifts Colleen's purpose. Her rage, when it comes, is not catastrophic. It is precise. She wants accountability, not ruin. She wants truth, not spectacle. And she wants to know whether the family that can shoulder ranks can shoulder repair. A sudden letter arrives from General Hammond, an invitation to a regional conference where Colleen is asked to present. It is a chance to reclaim narrative, to set public record straight. She accepts. Meanwhile, the base's rumor mill churns. Old colleagues whisper about missions that lacked press coverage and heroes who stayed anonymous. Colleen decides to use the platform not to gloat, but to teach. She will put a sliver of candlestrike on the record, not to boast, but to explain the moral calculus of leadership. The midpoint twist, the external saboteur revealed, the sisters' complicity accepted, opens the path for public vindication and private reckoning. Stakes tilt from accusation to repair, and Colleen prepares to step onto a stage that will either sever or stitch the ties that have always defined her. The conference hall is a different animal than the promotion ceremony, larger, more clinical, a deliberate stage for doctrine. Banners proclaim themes of strategic doctrine and asymmetric threats. Men and women with the soft clatter of metal settle in. Colleen arrives backstage with a pointer and a dossier. The Polaroid from earlier feels like ballast in her pocket. Erica sits in the second row, her posture a study in disciplined attention. The family tension is now public but contained, like a pressure vessel that could heat or cool. Colleen opens with a modest statement. Some missions never get a name. Some leaders never get a plaque. But every choice echoes. She speaks not to claim accolades, but to frame a larger lesson, that leadership is moral calculus under impossible constraints. Her voice calms the room. She is not asking for sympathy, but for understanding. She tells the candlestrike story, a decision she signed that risked career to save civilians. The details stay measured. She is careful to preserve classification where necessary and to give humanity where possible. The reaction is subtle but significant. Faces that once dismissed her as an absentee now tilt forward. Whispers recalibrate into attention. Colleen's timing is careful. When she reveals the operative truth that certain decisions have cost her personally, gasp and silence interplay. These are not tabloid gasps, but the sound of a community being forced to reevaluate moral lines. Midway, she pivots and names the work of intelligence not as cloak and dagger adulation, but as collective duty. Then, she does something unexpected. She invites Erica to the podium. The offer is an olive branch performed as a professional gesture, a younger officer sharing reflections. Erica rises, voice raw at first, then steady. She speaks about pride, about the hunger to belong, about mistakes made in the bright lights of ambition. Her admission is concise, painful, and without theatrical Shakespearean apologies. It is a soldier's confession, clear, direct, and accountable. Outside the stage lights, the task force compiles a final report. The tech trace shows Derek's manipulations were designed to create doubt and division, but not to destroy the institution entirely, more to shift power quietly than to bring ruin. The revelation makes the scandal less about an individual sin than a systemic vulnerability, how petty internal resentments can become weaponized when someone with motive and technical skill decides to hurt. Backstage, afterward, men and women approach Colleen with questions and handshakes. A retired general thanks her for articulating the moral ambiguity that everyone pretends doesn't exist. That validation is not a balm for all wounds, but it buys Colleen space to breathe. She and Erica walk into a behind-the-scenes corridor where the light is softer. Erica offers a small, honest thing, a training binder annotated with improvements she has already drafted based on Colleen's lessons. "I don't need your blessing," she says, "I need your honesty." Colleen accepts the binder. The task force moves to close the case. Derek's arrest formalized, Erica's reprimand lodged, and procedural recommendations filed to prevent similar leaks. The family, now forced into formal reconciliation, begins a fragile choreography of repair, short, realistic gestures rather than sweeping forgiveness. They eat together at a table where Colleen takes the head seat, not a grab for power, but a choice to no longer sit at the margins. Yet beneath the procedural closure is a quieter tension. Colleen recognizes the cost of visibility. Being seen means your wounds are visible too. She calculates that public recognition might be earned, but will also become a target for future politics. She weighs whether the truth she intends to speak publicly will protect the people she cared for in the field or expose them to unwarranted attention. That night, she walks past the family mantle and sees a gap in a framed photo, an empty spot where she used to stand. Her father stands beside her, older and steadier. He doesn't offer platitudes. He admits he had let medals blind him to intimacy. It is not cinematic reconciliation, no weeping embrace, but a language of adulthood, acknowledgement. The slow, ordinary work begins. As dawn comes for the conference's final day, Colleen prepares for a closing panel. She knows the final act is not only about exposing a leak, but about offering a way forward, procedural fixes, public transparency, and a culture that recognizes invisible work. The stakes are no longer personal revenge, they're institutional survival and family repair. The build toward climax is complete. The stage is set for a public reckoning that will test both career and kin. The final session draws a full house. Cameras swing. The topic: the ethics of clandestine choice and accountability. Colleen's name sits on the program with an unadorned title, Strategic Advisor. Her speech is short and controlled. Every line contains gravity rather than grief. She begins with a paradox. Silence is a currency that buys you safety, but it also bankrupts your name. The audience leans in. She releases a calibrated truth. The Candlestrike decision was hers, autonomous and morally chosen. She outlines the calculus: children trapped, a risk to an allied recon team, a choice between a tactical victory or a humanitarian rescue. She doesn't dramatize. She explains the logic that guided a decision which could have ended her career. A hush follows, not of shock, but of people recalibrating their moral compasses. She frames the story to highlight leadership as moral burden, not as theatrical heroism. Then she turns the panel from theory to practice. She invites Erica to speak briefly about corrective culture, about how institutions respond when they suspect wrongdoing among their own, and how human frailty can become a vector for institutional harm. Erica steps up. She does not apologize in the theatrical sense. Instead, she offers a soldier's admission and the work she has done since: training reforms, new audit routes, and personal accountability. Her words are shard true, and they cut through more than accusation could. Outside the panel room, a small contingent of veterans and analysts gather. An older officer approaches Colleen, his hand firm in a handshake that carries decades. "It takes courage to stand where you stood today," he says. His words feel like iron made gentle. Colleen responds that courage is often mundane, taking responsibility in private, not in parades. Back at base, the final task force report goes to command. Derek's confession, Erica's admission, and the technical fix recommendations form the backbone. The paper trail closes the loop on the crisis, but it doesn't erase the scars. Colleen knows the institutional fixes: two-factor archiving, stricter node audits, a new red flag review, are necessary, but she also knows culture changes slowly. The interpersonal climax comes later that evening at the family home. Colleen has invited her parents and Erica to dinner. The table is set not for ritual but for conversation. The manila envelope lies between plates like a relic. Colleen lays it down and lets silence do its work. Her father breaks it first. "Why didn't you tell us?" His voice is not accusation now, but wounded curiosity. Colleen answers without theatrical flourish. She was told to be quiet for security reasons. She chose protection over recognition. She explains that some service is paid in unseen debt. Erica's resignation is different. She does not beg. She offers the binder she created and a small form of restitution: service hours on training brigades, mentoring cadets. She says, "I'll make this right." The gesture is earnest and practical. Her mother, who once said, "Not everyone is meant to be exceptional," meets Colleen's eyes with something like penitent recognition. The mother's earlier sentence had been a quiet knife. Now she murmurs, "I never understood." It is not full redemption, but it is significant. Colleen does not demand apologies. She wants acknowledgement and evidence of change. Her father reaches for a framed photo on the shelf, one missing a face, and sets it on the table. "Take it," he says. The photograph's empty place becomes a space to fill. It is both literal and symbolic, a family admitting a gap and choosing to address it. The climax is not a melodramatic showdown, but a sequence of decisions. The public truth told at the conference, Derek's confession secured, Erica's acceptance of consequences, and the family choosing to sit with their history. For Colleen, the victory is not applause but clarity. The truth sits in the room like a settled thing. It does not erase the years, but it reframes them. She sleeps that night with the binder in her hands, not triumphant but resolved. The task force's work moves into implementation. Base policy changes begin to funnel into practice. The personal reconciliation evolves into daily work, monthly calls from her mother, training critiques from Erica, and a father who speaks of her role in a softer voice. The climax resolves the immediate crisis, but the story's final work will be the slow stitching of trust. Weeks later, the family sits for a new photograph. The camera tripod is set in the old living room where medals and regimental plates once monopolized attention. This time Colleen walks to the head of the table and sets a small, battered Polaroid in the center. She has replaced the empty frame on the mantel with a new one, a photograph printed from the conference, a portrait taken by someone who caught her at the podium. It is not staged heroism. It is steady, eyes leveled, jaw relaxed. They stand, arrange themselves, and a neighbor clicks the shutter. The camera's sound is small but decisive. For a brief moment, the room is balanced. It's not reconciliation as triumph, but as a practical arrangement, a family choosing a new version of itself that includes the hidden and the visible. Colleen does not demand grand statements. She accepts small rituals, a text from her mother asking if she'd had dinner, an unsolicited note from her father praising a lecture she gave. These things are not heroic, but they're honest. Colleen returns to D.C., to briefings and dossiers and quiet hotel rooms between flights. She teaches a monthly course on ethical decision-making at Fort Campbell. Attendance is a mix of seasoned officers and hungry cadets. Erica sits in the front row. She is present, engaged, not to reclaim a stage, but to learn a craft. The students' humility becomes part of their reconciliation. Their relationship softens into practical collaboration rather than tortured rivalry. One afternoon after a training session, a young cadet approaches Colleen. He stutters a question about moral risk, what to do when the mission and conscience diverge. Colleen sits with him on the steps of the academy building and says plainly, do the right thing because you can live with the weight of it. Leaders carry consequences, they don't weaponize them. The cadet nods, something like understanding breaking through. Months pass. The base implements the recommended digital safeguards. The technical fixes stop the easy leaks. The cultural work, training on ethical red flagging and family awareness workshops, begins slowly. Colleen receives letters from soldiers she once helped. One woman writes that a policy change she inspired in field extraction saved her team. The letters arrive like small, warm combustions of meaning. At home, the mantel now holds the new photograph. Colleen's image sits between her sister's and her father's, no longer cropped out, no longer a ghost. They have not transformed into an idyllic family, but they have chosen a new baseline, honesty with consequence. Dinner nights are quieter and sometimes awkward, but they happen. On a late summer evening, Colleen and Erica walk the base perimeter after a class. The sky bruises with sunset. Erica hands Colleen a plastic container with a small cake, blue icing, slightly crooked, 3 words written clumsily. Sister. Teacher. General. Colleen smiles and eats a small section, savoring the sweetness without theatrics. Advance, she tells Erica, pointing to the binder. Erica nods, a tiny grin cracking. No big speech, only a slow movement forward. The final image is of Colleen alone on a rooftop, the city roll beneath her, the base lights like constellations. She opens a small, plain notebook and writes a single line. Some missions never get a name. Some leaders choose to be seen. She closes the book and looks out at the horizon, not triumphant, simply aware that visibility has both costs and gifts. A train rumbles in the distance. A woman in uniform crosses the base below. Colleen watches, steady. The story closes in the ordinary. No trophies, no parades, only the slow work of teaching, of being present, and of letting a family learn the unwieldy language of repair. In the final frame, the Polaroid on her desk is not an artifact of erasure, but a record of inclusion. If your name is not in the history books, perhaps your work still saves someone's day. The camera fades on Colleen's quiet face, older, weathered, and enough.